BJ Gaddour with the Daily BJ, and these are my 10 favorite ways to plump that peach. I'm going to get right into the movements. There will be more information in the description. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for daily workouts. We're going to go movement one, the king of building that butt. It is the hip thrust. Now, my buddy Brett Contreras popularized this movement. He also created this hip thruster device. You can modify in a power rack setup by anchoring the bands to the pegs. There's lots of ways to make it work. Just Google it. But this is the key glute exercise. You get more glute activation on this than squats and deadlifts, particularly by elevating the shoulders, and by adding the band tension. It makes it a lot easier to do this without having to load up so many plates and get a barbell on your lap. It can be uncomfortable, it can be tough in some gym setups. You get peak tension and peak contraction. So we're going to get our feet positioned far enough in front of the body so we maintain a vertical shin angle to stress the glutes, not the quads. And we're also going to use our upper back as a pivot point. I'm going to crunch my abs, pull my ribs and shoulders down, tuck the chin, and then create what's called a posterior pelvic tilt at the top. It almost looks like I'm not going all the way up, but I am. I've got full hip extension, but I'm rounding out to make sure I don't get any motion at my low back. A lot of people will do that extended option. Just looks bad, feels bad all around. Bad news. You want to make sure you tuck that chin, pull the ribs and shoulders down, and squeeze the glutes through. And you want to maintain that good contraction. Add 1 to 2 second pause at the top. You can also make it a double band setup and create a lateral vector, both horizontal and lateral vectors simultaneously. You can kind of get the best of both worlds here by keeping lateral tension out against the mini band as you push through the horizontal vector of the big band. Squeeze it out and just keep tension out against that mini band the whole time. Get good 1 to 2 second squeezes at the top, chin tucked, ribs, shoulders down, glutes engaged. So many ways to do this. You can also do it on one leg, but that is my number one. We got 9 to go. All right, number 2 is a goblet squat or any sort of front squat or bodyweight squat with a mini band below or above the knees. Below the knee will be a little more challenging. Above the knee, I find, is a better way to kind of get the feel of spreading the hips. But what we do is we take that vertical force factor of the squat, which is already great for building the glutes, and now we engage more lateral hip musculature. Also clean up our form and technique. You'll squat deeper and lower without tucking around in your lumbar spine, lower back as much. So what you do is you approach the weight, and again, start with body weight, but I actually like, it's one of those things where a weight held here in the front, the rack position, creates a counterbalance, allowing you to sit taller and deeper. So get like that, pull it straight at the body, and then keeping the elbows tight to the sides, sit tall. You can have a slight toe flare, just spread the hips, sit, and come all the way up. All right, sets of 10 reps are phenomenal on this. Just focus on pushing out against the band and staying tall and sitting as deep as you can without rounding the spine or dumping at the hips. All right, so that's movement 2. So many ways you can do it. Great for the glutes. All right, number 3 is the hip walk. I like to do it 2 different ways. One is a little more challenging, but you create unique stresses for the lateral hips by changing the level of hinge you have at the hips. So I actually like to do this as a complex. I'll do a minute from a bent over hip hinge position like the bottom of a deadlift or stiff-legged deadlift, and then I'll do right after that, back to back, a minute of standing with a slight knee bend. So all we're gonna do here is flat back, hinge at the hips, kind of tabletop position. Think about linebacker position, except we go full tabletop, trunk parallel to the floor, and then I'm just pushing out against that band tension. Now, above the knee is easier, below the knee is harder with the same tension, but I'll do a minute of a couple steps that way, and then a couple steps that way continuously from the hinge position. And then after that first minute, I get upright, glutes are already fried. It's kind of a bodybuilding stack, but great way to bulletproof the knees and back and have a lateral hip emphasis. Again, the key to training the glutes, you want all vectors, horizontal, vertical, lateral, and rotational. We'll cover them through all of these variations. Number 4, skater jumps. People know it as a great bodyweight cardio movement, great for metabolic training, great for power training. Also, it's a movement that tends to be easier on the knees than most plyo or jump training because of the lateral side-to-side motion. You're in that lateral plane, which is really important for overall development, athleticism, and you know, working that ass. So what we're gonna do is hinge at the hips, athletic position, kind of shortstop, linebacker, running back position. You're going to attach the band above the knees, and you're going to push off. Initially, back toe can touch, but what I do is I get band tension pushing out to make it harder. You're swiping the arms across the body, landing soft, triple bends, ankles, knees, hips, and absorbing the landing, pushing out against the band tension. Doing that for sets of 30 to 60 seconds will absolutely light up the glutes, and you'll get a huge fat loss and metabolic response. And again, it's easy on the knees. Hope you enjoy that one. My go-to lower body exercise is the Bulgarian split squat. I find it to be the best option for building the quads, especially with a closer stance, but you can modify the stance and which side of the body you load to make more glute emphasis. So in terms of stance, close stance, more quads, longer stance is gonna create more of a glute emphasis, okay? So getting really out and far in front, you may not be able to get as low or have that back knee touch, but that long stance really stresses more glute hamstring, and you're gonna have a slight forward lean of the trunk. As long as the back is flat, that's fine. Now, I wanna increase the glute load or add load to it, and really want to emphasize the hip complex. You want to hold a dumbbell in the opposite arm of the lead leg. So it's called a contralateral load. In studies, it's the best way to activate the lateral hip complex, and it's also very easy, kind of unloads the spine, and great for strengthening core. You get asymmetrical load. Oops, see that? A lot of balance and stability. Just gonna sit down, load it up, push right through. Push it through the middle of the foot. If you want a little more glute too, maybe emphasize driving more through the heel. All right, so you're actually creating a standing side plank here. Lateral hip core musculature working hard. Long stance, contralaterally loaded. Best Bulgarian split squat for your butt. Here's a way to combine a vertical and a horizontal force factor for double the glute work in a stiff-legged deadlift or hip hinge pattern. I've got a band anchored to any sort of power rack, pole, tree, door frame even. You can make it work. And I'm going to be using a pair of dumbbells, and typically there's a vertical vector here where you're really stretching the glutes here, but then you get to the top and it's really easy. By adding that horizontal band tension, I do a couple things. One, I force myself to fully extend through the hips and squeeze the glutes and actually have tension at the top, so it actually becomes more challenging at the top than it would be normally, and it's a way for me to overload the glutes without having to add endless amounts of weight, which can stress the spine. So I'm going to position, get out as far as I can. I'm going to slightly round the upper back at the top. When I do dumbbells, I like to start, you can do so many ways, but I have the palms facing to begin so I can get full extension to the hips, and then I hinge back at the hips. The band also pulls me back further into hip hinge, clearing up impingement at the hips that might be blocking me from getting lower. I just maintain that flat back position, full stretch, pause at the bottom, squeeze through at the top. And again, I actually want you to round the upper back slightly at the top, which allows you to get that posterior pelvic tilt, which activates the glutes more. You can also do this on one leg, and much like the Bulgarian split squat, if you want to really overload the lateral hip, hold it in the opposite hand with the dumbbell, reach back, and then pull through the hips. And it's a great way to build the glutes and the hamstrings, but it particularly emphasizing the glutes with that band tension. I love the eccentric step up to hammer the glutes. We're not just going to do a movement that has a lot of flexion through the hips, which is great for building the glutes and coming into extension out of that movement, but we're also slowing down the lowering portion of the movement to create more of a muscle damage stimulus, which spurs gains in size and strength. Initially, grab a pair of 5 or 10 pound dumbbells to reach for counterbalance. It allows you to kind of do it even better than you would with your body weight. Then eventually you can start loading it by holding at your hips or even holding in a goblet position. Holding hips with a pair of dumbbells will give you more of a glute ham emphasis. So I'm gonna have a pair of 10 pound dumbbells here, get a high boxer step where ideally the hip crease is just beneath the knee crease. You're gonna step through, and then holding the dumbbells, as you sink down, you're gonna reach and take at least 5 seconds to lower to the bottom while tracking that knee over the ankle. Reach, reach. Really in that bottom half, you wanna plop slow. Fight that, come right through. All right, I like sets of 5 reps with 5-second lowerings. Slow, slow, slow reach, coming right back up as a way to really build your glute strength, bulletproof the knees, and once you can do that with a pair of 5 or 10 pound dumbbells for counterbalance, go to heavier weights and hold to the side. But great way to hammer the glutes, and you get that deep, deep stretch. Loaded stretch work is really what causes gains. So reverse lunges are already more glute intensive, more hip dominant compared to their sister or brother. I don't know what the fuck their relation is, but forward lunges are more quad dominant, okay? They stress the knees more. If you extend the range of motion on the reverse lunge, you make it even more glute intensive. Any sort of low box step, even a phone book will work, weight plates, and I actually like doing it off what's called the sand dune stepper, which creates a sand feel for even more instability training and more glute and hip stabilization work. You can get this at gardengains.com and get a discount with my coupon code THEDailyBJ, and it's gains with a Z. Anybody who says gains with an S, you're off the team. So all I'm going to do here is, with the extended range of motion, I'm going to step back, land soft and control, and then push right through the hips. Adding a nice little 1 or 2 second pause at the bottom as a way to intensify with lighter loads and really challenge the muscle in the most challenging position when it's fully stretched. Pull the hips right through, and then you can see how hard my foot and ankle are working to stabilize and balance. So again, it's not just about building the glutes, it's about bulletproofing the lower body and the back. This is one of my favorite ways to do it. Sets of 8 to 15 reps on each side are great to hammer it up. Enjoy. All right, maybe the king, in my opinion, I get some of the best butt pumps of my life doing this exercise, is a shoulders and foot elevated hip thrust. So we're extending the range of motion on the level of the foot by elevating the feet. We can sink down lower into hip flexion, and we're maximizing the glute activation with the shoulders elevated position. I'm also adding a mini band, which actually creates a reciprocal action of working this top side hip flexor and giving tension into that work leg glutes. You actually get more hip flexor and glute activation, create more hip separation, great for running, lunging, just improving form and technique on almost every exercise. So I'm going to get like this. I'm going to position the box. I'm using these hip thruster boxes from Brett Contreras. You can modify what you have access to there. And all I'm going to do is put the middle of the foot on the edge. Upper back is the pivot point here, and I'm going to push through, squeeze, lower, and control. Try to drive that top knee through the tension of the mini band to really work top side hip flexor, downside glute, and no matter how strong I get, these are always tough for even 10 reps, because really it's about how hard you squeeze at the top and about how much separation you create between the legs as you push through. So do it with the mini band. You can also do it without, but when in doubt, why not add the band to make it work harder? The final move is mini band hip abductions. You can do these lying down. You can also do them seated. Let me show the lying down version first. It's the easiest way to show it and easiest way to start with the movement. You want to go above the knees with the mini band. The hip loop from Brett Contreras I'm using here. The wider the feet, okay, not only the more internal hip rotation you get as a mobilizer through the hips, but you also create, you know, a bigger squeeze. You get more band tension as you come out and abduct the hips. So now we're working more of a rotational transverse plane. Again, we've done a lot of lateral, vertical, horizontal stuff. We got to round it on, get some rotational work too, and work those hip abductors, kind of like the sex machine at the gym, except you don't need the machine. So here we're going to go. I actually like to raise the hips and crunch the abs. Not raise the hips, raise the head and crunch the abs. If you want to have a pillow or pad or a Bosu ball for the neck, that's fine. I just find it locks in my core positioning and just really helps me emphasize through the hips. These are great for pumping reps. High rep 20 to 50 rep sets. All right, and again, the wider your stance, the harder it is, both in terms of mobility on the way in and tension on the way out. Now you can also do these seated, and you can play around with depth. Like if you want to work on a deep squat, you do it from a deep seated position. If you want to work on higher positions of the squat and training not to let that valgus knee collapse happen and keep that good hip spread and good balance, good glute activation going, play around with the depth of the bend at the level of the hip. You can also play around with the way you are more upright, the way you're leaning back, even hinging forward. So there's lots of ways to do it. And all I'm going to do, again, wider feet, more mobility challenge, greater tension on the way out. I can do it more trunk erect. I can do it more of a kind of from a hip hinge position. All right, so keeping the chest up. I can also move the legs forward more and lean back and do it this way. All right, so many ways to do it. I got this idea from Brett Contreras, who makes this hip loop. So playing around with the depth with which you are seating, sitting, or the actual positioning of the trunk, erect, more leaning forward, which is harder from really deep seated position, or kind of even leaning back and just working on that abduction. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Please subscribe to my channel and check out all my other top 10 exercises for body parts you want to build. Peace.